On the night of September 17, 1902, the richest man in human history stood on wet grass in his pajamas and watched his empire burn. This was not a stock market crash. This was not a revolution. This was fire devouring the wooden beams of his beloved home in Pocantico Hills. John Davison Rockefeller, whose fortune at that time exceeded $200 million, a sum unimaginable for the early 20th century, was powerless. His guards, his millions, his Standard Oil monopoly controlling 90% of America's oil, could not stop the flames that, ironically, started not from oil, but from a new, fashionable electric spark. Why has history forgotten this fire? Why do we remember the Vanderbilt's palaces, but know almost nothing about what stood on the hills north of New York until the appearance of the famous stone fort? The answer lies in the psychology of the man who was simultaneously the most hated and the loneliest titan of his time. That night, when the roof of the Parsons Wentworth house collapsed, Rockefeller was 63 years old. He was no longer the predator seizing Cleveland's oil refineries. He was a tired man suffering from alopecia, a disease that had deprived him of all hair on his body, including eyebrows, giving his face a mask-like, frightening expression. Newspapers depicted him as a monster, an octopus strangling competitors. But here, among the hills of Tarrytown, he was just an old man who wanted quiet. This fire became a turning point. It destroyed not just wood and furniture, it destroyed the illusion that the richest man could live a simple life. The fire proved, you cannot hide behind modesty if you own half the world. The paradox of the situation was that Rockefeller knew about the wiring problems. He had been informed that the wires in the old house, bought 9 years ago, were installed improperly. Workers were supposed to come the next morning to fix everything. But fate, it seems, has its own sense of humor. Rockefeller, the man who built his empire on precise calculation, on controlling every drop of oil and every cent, lost his home due to a 24-hour delay. When the smoke cleared, the damage was estimated at just $40,000, a ridiculous sum for him, less than he earned in 1 hour. But the loss was not financial. It was a blow to his sanctuary. The family temporarily moved to the neighboring Council House, but the question hung in the air. What next? Senior Rockefeller, faithful to his ascetic Baptist habits, wanted to build something simple, perhaps wooden again, just a comfortable porch where he could sit and watch the Hudson. But another character entered the game, his son, John Davison Rockefeller, Jr. Jr. understood what the father did not want to admit. The dynasty needed a monument. They needed not just a house, but a fortress, a place that would never burn. A place that would tell the world, we are here forever. It was exactly at that moment, amid the ashes of 1902, that a project was born which would become the most complex, expensive, and psychologically burdensome long-term construction in the family's history. This is not a story about building a palace for balls. The Rockefellers did not dance. This is a story about how the fear of losing control forced a modest billionaire to create a stone labyrinth that was meant to protect him from the world, but ultimately became his golden cage. None of them knew then that the construction of the new house, which would be called Kykwit, would drag on for a decade, would quarrel the father with the best architects of the era, and would require demolishing an already built structure because it would prove not perfect enough. The fire was merely the beginning. The real drama unfolded when the first foundation stone touched the ground. To understand why the construction of a new house on the ashes turned into a decade-long psychological duel, one must look not at the architectural drawings, but at a small, worn notebook in a red cover that John Davison Rockefeller kept like a holy relic. He called it Book A. In this ledger, started at the age of 18, the future billionaire recorded every penny spent. Purchase of clothing, payment for laundry, donation to the church, everything was accounted for. This habit did not disappear when his fortune exceeded the budgets of European states. Rockefeller was not simply rich. He was obsessed with control and thrift, the roots of which traced back to his poor childhood in Richford, New York. His father, William Big Bill Rockefeller, was a traveling salesman of dubious elixirs and a bigamist who taught his sons to switch plates in order to always come out ahead. His mother, Eliza, was a strict Baptist who taught that willful waste leads to woeful want. This duality, the predatory grip of the father and the Puritan asceticism of the mother, shaped Rockefeller's worldview. He sincerely believed in the phrase he often repeated, "God gave me this money." And if the money was given by God, then he was not the owner, but the steward. Spending them on golden toilets or marble staircases, as the nouveau riche did in Newport, was for him not just bad taste, but a sin. That is why he chose Pocantico Hills. While the Astors and Vanderbilts built palaces on the ocean shore to see and be seen, Rockefeller in 1893 began buying up land on the high hills above the Hudson to hide away. He needed not balls, but landscapes. He bought plots from neighbors, relocated roads, planted thousands of trees, creating his personal Eden, fenced off from the world that hated him by high fences and dense forests. Here enters the social conflict that was tearing the family apart from within. Senior Rockefeller had already defeated all competitors in business. He had crushed small oil refiners, created the Standard Oil Trust, and become the most powerful man in America. But he was losing the battle for public opinion. Newspapers called him the devil. And here takes the stage his son, John Rockefeller Jr., the only male heir. Jr., raised in the same strictness, he wore his sister's dresses until the age of 8, understood what the father did not see. To cleanse the family name, they needed to play by the elite's rules. The billionaire's modesty was perceived by the public not as a virtue, but as the stinginess of Scrooge. When the old house burned down, Junior saw in it a chance. The father wanted to build on the fire site another modest wooden cottage, perhaps slightly larger than the previous one, with a porch for watching the river. The son, however, understood. They needed a residence that would legitimize their status. Not ostentatious luxury like the Vanderbilts, but restrained, cold grandeur reminiscent of English estates or Roman villas. This was a clash of two philosophies: the fading 19th century with its Protestant work ethic, and the oncoming 20th century with its cult of image and PR. Junior acted cautiously. He knew that a direct assault on his father's thriftiness would fail. So he began a complex game, proposing projects that on paper seemed modest, but in reality required colossal engineering solutions. The site for the new house was chosen perfectly, the highest point of the estate, Kekwit Hill, which in the Dutch dialect meant lookout. From here opened a view for 40 kilometers around. But to build a house here, it was necessary to bring water, electricity, and roads to the top of the rock. This was a task for strategists, not for simple carpenters. Senior Rockefeller, tired and ill, agreed to entrust the construction to his son, unaware that he was signing on for a project that would become a test of their relationship and his wallet. He thought he was building a refuge for his old age, while the son was beginning to build a monument that was meant to outlast them all. Junior understood that he could not convince his father alone, who was accustomed to counting every matchstick. He needed an ally from another world, capable of bringing a note of genuine elegance into the harsh universe of Baptist asceticism. This catalyst was his wife, Abby Aldrich. Their marriage in 1901 was not just a union of two hearts, but a strategic merger of two polar civilizations. The Rockefellers represented new, raw money earned from oil and sweat, bound by Puritan morality. The Aldrichs, led by the powerful Senator Nelson Aldrich, were the embodiment of political elite, high art, and refined social polish. Abby, raised among art collections and diplomatic receptions, possessed the taste that the Rockefeller men catastrophically lacked. She gently but persistently instilled in her husband the revolutionary idea. The house should not be just a shelter from the rain, but a cultural statement. It was thanks to Abby's invisible influence that the choice of architects fell on the young but ambitious firm Delano and Aldrich. Chester Aldrich was a distant relative of Abby, which created the illusion of a family contract. But in reality, it was a subtle calculation. Junior hired people who spoke the language of high art, but knew how to draw up estimates. The main argument for the stubborn father was safety. "Stone doesn't burn, father." This argument was irrefutable after the ashes of 1902. Thus, under the cover of pragmatism and fear of fire, the implementation of the project began, which was meant to overturn the notion of modesty. In 1906, the quiet Kykwit Hill turned into a grandiose, noisy construction site. It was a surreal sight, in the midst of a dense forest where only birdsong had been heard before. Strict, cold grey walls suddenly began to rise. This was not an ornate European palace with gold stucco, like those built by competitors. This was, essentially, a fortified bunker sculpted into a classical villa. Granite was quarried right there, on the estate, by blasting the rock with dynamite, which allowed saving on logistics, the only fact that truly warmed the soul of senior Rockefeller. But he did not notice the main subtext. Every stone was laid to create an atmosphere of absolute, overwhelming eternity. Junior was not building a Dhaka, he was building a dynastic temple. The old met the new. Rough, heavy American stone was worked according to the elegant canons of an English estate. The merging of worlds began, but none of the participants, including the architects, yet suspected that this first compromise version of the house would become a grandiose engineering mistake that would soon have to be corrected not with a decorator's brush, but with jackhammers. By 1913, when the scaffolding finally disappeared from the top of Kykwit Hill, the world beheld not just a house, but an architectural psalm carved from stone. What appeared before the eyes of the few guests was the result of ruthless reconstruction. The first version of the mansion, completed 3 years earlier, had failed spectacularly. The guest rooms turned out to be too cramped for the egos of the owners, and the noise from delivery trucks climbing the gravel woke the sensitively sleeping patriarch. It was a catastrophe for perfectionists. Then Junior hired William Wells Bosworth, an architect trained at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, to transform the clumsy cottage into a classical temple. The result was the facade we see today. Strict, symmetrical, devoid of frivolity, resembling rather a bank or a library than a cozy nest. This was architectural psychology in its pure form. The exterior of the house radiated the same impenetrability and cold politeness for which John Davison Rockefeller himself was renowned. To enter Kykwit meant to embark on a journey from the world of chaos to the world of absolute order. Unlike the Newport palaces, where every inch screamed of spent millions, here wealth whispered. The vestibule greeted guests not with gold, but with cool marble and silence so dense that footsteps sank into it like into water. But the true heart of the house, its emotional center, was hidden in the music room. Here, under a unique ceiling window, an oculus that during the day let in soft, diffused light, and at night allowed viewing the stars, stood a huge organ. For senior Rockefeller, a man who considered theater a sin and cards a vice, music was the only permitted passion. When the organist pressed the keys, the sound filled the space, vibrating in the listeners' chests, but thanks to the thick walls, not a single note escaped outward. This was a metaphor for Rockefeller's life, a storm of emotions inside, absolute silence outside. However, the most telling detail of this estate was hidden from view. It was not the tapestries or the Ming Dynasty Chinese porcelain that Junior so loved. It was an engineering system designed to solve the problem of that very noise that irritated the father. Bosworth designed and built gigantic underground tunnels for delivering coal and supplies. Trucks and wagons drove straight into the belly of the hill, unloaded underground, and left without ever appearing on the surface. Servants, food, fuel, everything that sustained the house's life moved through invisible arteries. Senior Rockefeller could sit on the western terrace, gazing at the Hudson River, and no extraneous sound, no sight of a black worker disturbed his illusion of complete control over reality. The house functioned like a living organism, its innards hidden deep under the skin. Each of the 40 rooms was designed with strict hierarchy in mind. The library with redwood paneling was a place of strategy, where decisions were made that changed the US economy. The dining room was a stage for family rituals, where food was served with the precision of Swiss watches. But it was the gardens surrounding the house that finally revealed the intent. Bosworth created Italian-style terraces adorned with classical statues and fountains, including a copy of the Florentine Ocean Fountain. Every tree, every bush was planted to frame views of the river, turning the landscape into a living painting. There was no wild nature here, only tamed. This estate spoke the language of power. Even the horizon, even the river, even the trees seemed part of Standard Oil's assets. Kikwit was not a house for parties. It had no ballroom like the Vanderbilts. It was a monastery for the planet's richest people, where the religion was discipline, silence, and efficiency. Here they lived not to enjoy life, but to control it. In March 1915, when the echo of construction work had barely faded in Kikuit's corridors, the stone walls encountered an enemy that no Standard Oil check could stop. Laura Spellman Rockefeller, the faithful companion and the only person whose opinion Senior John valued above his own, passed away. This event exposed the most terrible irony of the entire project. The grandiose house, for which the son had fought so fiercely to ensure his parents a dignified old age, turned out to be ready too late. The woman, for whose comfort Junior built these terraces and gardens, managed to live in the completed estate for a pitifully short time. For the richest man on earth, this blow became crushing proof of gold's powerlessness before time. For 51 years, Laura had been his moral anchor. When journalists depicted Rockefeller as a demon, she saw in him a simple man, and it was her presence that justified his ambitions. Now, left alone in the 40 rooms filled with cold marble and silent servants, he confronted deafening emptiness. The grandeur of Kikwit, meant to demonstrate the dynasty's triumph, suddenly turned into scenery for profound personal loneliness. Those very tunnels that hid daily life for the sake of silence now only amplified the eerie isolation of the master from the living world. Here the viewer encounters an insoluble dissonance. Does this old man, sitting by the fireplace in an empty hall, deserve sympathy if millions of people hated him for his ruthlessness? Laura's death tore the mask from the impeccable facade of success. It turned out that behind the walls designed by the best architects of the era hid ordinary human fragility. This moment became a turning point, not only for the father, but also for the son. Junior realized with horror that he had built not just a palace, but a magnificent mausoleum for a living person. Senior Rockefeller, having lost his only source of warmth, began slowly turning into a shadow of himself, a ghost wandering through the impeccably manicured gardens. It was exactly here, at this point of grief, that the deep transformation began. When personal happiness became impossible, the only way to fill this void was a radical rethinking of the purpose of all accumulated wealth. While Senior John was learning to live with the oppressive silence inside Kikwit, the outside world was preparing a blow that threatened to destroy the dynasty faster than the fire of 1902. In April 1914, just a year before Laura's death, the Ludlow massacre occurred in distant Colorado. A strike at the family-owned mines ended in tragedy. women and children died in the shootout and fire. America exploded with hatred. Crowds of protesters stood not somewhere far away, but marched under the windows of Standard Oil offices, demanding retribution. Kikuit turned from a serene refuge into a besieged fortress. It seemed that the Rockefellers' story should end with a lynch mob or complete social exile. But it was precisely this large-scale crisis that forced John Jr. to execute a brilliant strategic pivot. He understood what the father had missed. Stone walls, no matter how high, would not save them from public outrage. What was needed was not isolation, but radical openness. It was exactly in Kikuit's offices, under the stern gazes of ancestral portraits, that a new concept was developed: to turn America's most hated name into a synonym for salvation. Junior, against the advice of old directors, hired Ivy Lee, a pioneer of public relations, and began rewriting the script. From a ruthless octopus and robber baron, Senior Rockefeller publicly began transforming into an eccentric but kind grandfather, handing out shiny dimes to children on the street. But behind this PR theater stood a tectonic internal change that occurred in the heart of the estate. The purpose of their astronomical wealth became not power, but total philanthropy. Kikuit ceased to be just a house for summer rest. It became the operational center of global humanism. Here, behind closed doors, decisions were made to create foundations that would defeat yellow fever, build the University of Chicago, and preserve national parks. The money that Rockefeller considered given by God flowed back into the world in a gigantic stream. This was a transformation of biblical scale. Capital accumulated through ruthless monopoly now worked for redemption. The estate's walls no longer hid gold. They guarded a strategy that was meant to justify the very existence of billionaires. The old man, having lost his wife, found a new purpose: to live to 100, not to earn even more, but to see the world's hatred turn to gratitude. John Davison Rockefeller died on May 23, 1937. He was 97 years old. He fell just 3 years short of his cherished goal of a century. But by that time, the numbers on the calendar no longer mattered. The man whom the entire nation once hated passed away as the greatest philanthropist in history, having given away more than $500 million, half his fortune. And what of Kikuit? The stone fort built by the son to protect the father from the noise and gazes of the outside world performed its final, most paradoxical somersault. In 1979, after the death of his grandson Nelson Rockefeller, the estate was transferred to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. What was created as a zone of absolute, paranoid privacy became a public museum. Today, any tourist for $25 can walk through the same corridors where the fates of world oil were decided in complete silence and peek into the tunnels that hid the servants. This contains the final, deafening lesson of this story. Unlike the literary Jay Gatsby, who built a castle for the sake of illusion and died in solitude, or the real Vanderbilts, whose marble cottages in Newport became cold mausoleums of vanity, the Rockefellers managed to transform their real estate into a living legacy. The fire of 1902 destroyed the old wooden mindset, making way for something more durable than mere comfort. Kikuit today rises above the Hudson not as a monument to untold wealth, but as a reminder of the price of transformation. This estate proves that walls can protect the body from the wind, but only the meaning with which you fill the space around you protects from oblivion. Senior Rockefeller feared losing control, but found immortality only when he handed over the keys, first to his son, then to society. When you look at this stern stone facade, you see not just a billionaire's house. You see the physical embodiment of an eternal truth. Everything we build only for ourselves dies with us. Everything we build for others gains the right to eternity. The fire erased the first house, but it also tempered the dynasty, teaching it the main rule. To preserve the empire, it must be turned into a garden open to the world.